Tell me what the hell are you scared of when in the end the only thing
Where's
that's
the love?
saying
Right here on
love's
this
in the
podcast.
way.
Welcome to Love
Welcome
Drops,
to Love Drops,
where your
never the
hosts
things
and
I
One Love
told you,
ambassadors,
never the
Charles
seconds
and
when I
Diane,
wasted,
will
when it
share
all
love,
to an empty
hope,
world
and
that tastes the
inspirational
sweetest. So it's
topics
like
taken from
one of
their
these
journey
days when
and
each
world
one of
events.
the
We
challenges
will
I
also include
find.
on location recordings and special pop up guests from cool places all around the world. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Whether big or small, love never fails. Oh, love never, love it conquers all. Love never fails.
Hey y'all, this is maritri Garrett, and normally just known by maritri. I am a singer, songwriter, multi instrumentalist, composer from Southern California. I studied at Fisk University and was a Fisk Jubilee singer. Went to Howard, studied in the jazz department, lived in New York for 20 years making music, and now I am in California in the house that I grew up in making music again. I want to give a shout out to Charles and Diane. It's so wonderful to be on Love Drop podcast. They are such amazing folks. I met them in Nashville with my friend Eleanor Graves at her home where I was doing a home concert several years ago. And they were just such beautiful beacons of light and stewardship and spirit and all of those things that we should all be as human beings. As a child, I was really inspired by my father, who was a jazz musician, saxophonist, and also just having music always in the house. There was a piano in the house forever. And I, at about 2.5, started crawling up on the bench and playing songs that I heard on the radio by ear. At first, my mother was like, "Oh, that's so cute." And then they realized that I actually was able to play the songs and sing the songs. And that's how it all sort of started. But my father would get up pretty much every morning and practice for several hours on his horns. So I learned that discipline from him, just watching him and what he did. And he listened to a lot of jazz, but he also listened to country music. And we watched Tee Haw together every Sunday. And he talked about the importance of being on time and playing with integrity and working with people who were very passionate about what they were doing. And he also made it very clear that I could do whatever it is that I wanted as a musician, because he and my mother married late in life. I mean, 28, 29, which doesn't sound late now, but 50 plus years ago, that was really late. And he gave up being on the road so that he could be home and be a father and be a parent. And he was a really great one of both of those, but he made sure that I was able to take care of myself, that I didn't need to have all of the normal conventions of normal life, get married, have children, have a 9 to 5, be a doctor, whatever that was. And so that was all really, really helpful for me as a kid. I mean, I was really little when he started talking to me about that, because I think he always knew. My mother, on the other hand, wanted me to be a doctor, marry a doctor, have 2 children that later became doctors, and typical, African American goals, especially in that period. Both of my parents came out of Mississippi in '59, so Mississippi was definitely burning and crazy and all of that. But yeah, I mean, I was very inspired by listening to the jazz greats, Charlie Parker, Coltrane, but I also listened to Stevie Wonder and the Beatles, and I listened to classical music because I was classically trained from the age of 5. So I played a lot of classical music as well and really enjoyed it. So my earliest challenge was probably after playing by myself for 3 years, because teachers wouldn't take me until I was 5. That was just sort of the custom. And in a way, that was great because I was allowed to just freely explore on the piano without any real limitations. And so when I first started studying at 5, I had this teacher, delightful, Miss Little. I would have her play the song for me, and then I would play it back, sort of like a parrot. But I couldn't read music, and so that went on for 2 years. So I was still sort of just doing my own thing and fooling the teacher. And then my mother came to a lesson and realized that I couldn't read the music, and so she switched me to another teacher, Hazel Edwards, and Mrs. Edwards no longer let me slide. She made sure that I learned how to read, and we fought back and forth. But I did learn how to read, and later in my career, that was the best thing ever because I was able to accompany ballet classes and accompany vocalists, and I played in the jazz band, and so I began to read as easily as I could hearing the music. So that was really helpful.
Love's the only
A lot of women talk about how difficult it is to be a woman in this field. And I think in some cases that's very true. I didn't suffer a lot of that just because I was always a musician first and then a singer. So I was never a chick singer, which is so, a lot of women just sing. A lot of women just sing. And so there's a certain stereotype that is placed upon them by male musicians, and the respect often has to be really earned. But I always played piano first, and then later, I learned how to play guitar at 40, and I picked up the bass a couple of years ago and the cello, and I just never thought that I would play other instruments. But it's a very male dominated world, and so there are very few women who play, but there's a different sort of respect that happens. So I think for me that was always a little bit easier. My mother and I used to fight about being a musician, and she was so against it, even though she drove me to lessons and paid for lessons and took me to recitals, and I danced as well. So she was always very good about taking me to things and making sure that I was exposed and learned everything that I need to. But that was just supposed to be sort of a finishing for a young woman rather than the job and the career. So we used to get into it a lot because now, I mean, as an adult and raising my nieces and looking at them, people coming directly out of the civil rights movement and trying to figure out how to raise kids. And so many of us became doctors, lawyers, teachers because our parents needed that. So we didn't really have the luxury as kids do now of just being whatever it is we want. And so I really appreciate my mom. And then I also look at the jazz musicians, the female jazz musicians at the time, and what they had to overcome. I mean, Jim Crow in full effect, and then being a woman, and then so many drugs and substances available, and just I can only imagine the depression of being on the road and trying to do what it is that you love, and then perhaps getting strung out. And it was a really difficult life, and I think that she always wanted a better life for me, and because she was an amazing mother, she was an amazing wife. She worked full time. She kept a museum quality house, and she was just amazing. And she wanted that for me, but next level. But I wasn't really interested in that. My only interest was doing music from the time I was really small. That's all I thought about. It's all I did. It's all I wanted to do. And everything else was just sort of a distraction. I mean, until very recently, I hadn't really thought about having a family or raising kids or being married, because my parents were my family, my brother was my family, and now that they are not here any longer, I started to think about my own mortality and being by myself and having children to raise and all of that. So yeah, so that.
love's the only
Difficulties now. I think finding work as a woman in music is challenging, at least being on stage, just because there's the sexual aspect of it. And I remember back in the day, we shot the deal, several deals, to MCA and Universal, and there was always this, oh, but you need a street edge, or you need to show more skin, or, and that for me was always an issue, because I'm like, okay, but I'm sitting here, I'm a classically trained Black female musician. When I was at Howard, everything just sort of shifted. I had this band called Hue. There were three of us, three women. We all played, we all sang. So it was a trio: viola, cello, piano, and we were doing original songs and some pretty interesting covers. And we were meeting with one of the executives at MCA Universal. And I just remember he was like, well, like, do y'all just sit around naked and practice? And I was like, ew, this is disgusting. And a couple weeks later, the office had called me and they said, hey, could you go pick up Will Downing? He's at the train station. And I was one of the only people that had a car. And so I went to go pick him up, and we were in the car, and he said to me, so what do you plan to do? What are you planning to do with your life? What are you working on right now? And I said, well, I am shopping a deal. And and he said, really, you're shopping a deal? He said, well, let me just say this to you. If you get a deal, you're going to wind up like me, doing the same record over and over and over again, because somebody tells you that that's what you're supposed to do. And I was such a fan, and I looked at him, and I was like, are you serious? And he said, yeah. He said, and that is a way to go. It's probably the easier way to go. Or you could be an independent artist, and you could carve your own way out and do things your way and let the world catch up. And I think that was some of the most profound advice I have ever had. And it's funny, I look back along my path, and there are these things that happen that are sort of life-changing, and that was one of them for me. That completely changed my trajectory. It changed my thought about what I wanted to be. And I decided pretty much at that moment that I would figure it out myself and make it happen. And so I did. That's what I did. I mean, and doing that, I was able to learn instruments. I was able to take time and learn to sing in different languages. So it really just allowed me to grow as an artist and fully step into that. And I realized that it's not really, I mean, it probably should be, but it's not as much about the money and the fame, but it's really, for me, about the artistry and sharing my soul and myself with the world. And I've been really fortunate. I mean, I was a Jubilee singer, so that's how I learned to be on the road and sing. And then I went to Howard, and I was in the jazz band, the huge jazz band. And then also I had my own band. And then I moved to New York, and we did a lot of things. We opened for Gladys Knight. I was training with Mary J. Blige there was a Nina Simone movie that was supposed to be made. So I was training her to play piano like Nina Simone, and she was just incredible and gracious. And then I worked with Michael Amante, who was a classical singer, and I worked with Barbara Streisand. I worked with the Black Rock Coalition with Michelle Ndegeocello and Living Color and B. Jeffrey Smith and the Family Stand. And I studied with and toured with Jerry Allen, who is this incredible jazz pianist. And I studied with Grady Tate, but we did things like open for the Far Side as well. And having the ability to sort of cross genres and work with people that are really high level, I do feel very fortunate about that. And I think, as Will Downing said, I don't feel like I would have been able to do all of those things if I had been pigeonholed into one thing and then perhaps done a record which sat on a shelf and didn't get released, because this is sometimes what happens to artists, which is why somebody like Q-Tip will do an incredible album that won't get released for 10 years, and then it gets released 10 years later, and it's still the most amazing thing that you've heard. But meantime, in the meantime, musicians have to eat, right? We have to eat. We have to raise our kids. If we if we are brave enough to have them. So it's been a really interesting ride, but I have really enjoyed myself, and I have applied myself to every situation that I've been in. During the pandemic, I got several calls to score plays and score short films and those sorts of things, which I've always really wanted to do. And in doing that, I also learned how to record myself, how to record on the equipment that I have so that I can make music in my house. I don't have to worry about going to a studio and that. So that's another thing on the learning curve, just figuring out all of that. So yeah, I mean, are there challenges? Sure. I mean, there are challenges in everything, just trying to figure out. I mean, my biggest challenge is trying to figure out how to get enough sleep and how not to just constantly go. You asked about greatest achievements. I feel like in the last couple of years, just being able to take care of both of my parents as they transitioned, to take care of my brother as he transitioned, and then to raise his 3 daughters. And I had them pretty much by myself for 3 years, just homeschooling and then taking them to school and getting them on their feet and giving them everything that they need. And I think that is probably my biggest accomplishment to date, and probably the most important, just putting back into the world what I was given, because I had amazing parents that covered all the bases. And I now have learned exactly why my mother was the way she was. I completely get it. I understand why my father gave me what he gave me, and the balance between the two of them, and how much children need that balance, right? And so just looking at that has sort of made me think about relationships and how to raise children and what children need. And children need parents that are dedicated to them and dedicated to each other in a perfect world.
Love's the only thing.
The first week of the pandemic, I was actually in New York. I had gone to do a show and I had a tour planned. I was also substitute teaching at the girls' school. I had been there for the last couple of years, which was great because it allowed me to pay the bills, take care of the house. I still had my place in Brooklyn at the time. My brother was sick and I guess dying, and we didn't realize how sick he was. So I felt like I needed a day job to take care of everything. I mean, when I came out here, my mom passed. Suddenly I had to buy a car. I was left with a dog and a cat and a house and all of these things that I had never dealt with after living in New York for 20 years and being a musician and just having to take care of me. Now I had other mouths to feed and to take care of. And so the pandemic hit. I came home. I only saw 2 people when I was in New York, and both of them got it. They both got COVID-19. And then that second week in, I lost 2 very dear friends. One, Wallace Roney, trumpet player who I had planned to work on a record with that following year. We had spoken in December about doing a record. He was like, yeah, I'm in China. And when I got the news, I spoke to his manager and he said, oh yeah, we all got really, really sick and everybody got better. And then Wallace got sick again and then passed. And so I took the pandemic very seriously from the very beginning because I had lost friends. And to date, the number is probably between 25 and 30. But could you just come on Facebook and just talk and let us know that it's going to be okay? And I thought, what a weird request. I barely go live on Facebook. But I thought about it, and I thought about it over several days, and I thought, well, who knows how long we're going to be here. Let me just do this. So I went on and I spoke a little bit about how things are cyclical and how we've had pandemics before and how the world goes through these changes, but we always bounce back differently, hopefully better, hopefully with lessons learned. And so then I got a message saying, hey, could you just come on tomorrow and just sing? And I thought, well, okay. So I went on and I sang a song or two, and then people started just writing and saying, hey, listen, we need this. And somehow I think maybe after doing it for about a week, I think that second week, I wound up being on for an hour and just playing music and just talking. And my audience started growing. And one of my friends said, "Hey, listen, why don't you monetize it? Just put your Cash App information up." And I was like, "Really? Like, really?" And I put it up, and there was a stranger, a guy that I didn't know, Barry Dykeman, and he sent $200. And I was like, wow, a stranger that I've never met just totally reached out and supported me. I don't want to teach anymore. I've never really wanted to teach. It was just a means to an end. So I thought, well, you know what? Let's just see how this goes. And through the support of Barry and some of my childhood friends, the dailies, I was so well supported. I mean, I was able to, and here I am playing music every day from my home, taking care of all the things I need to take care of, and I'm healthy and good. And I mean, I used to go to the gym all the time and go to yoga, and I started just hiking in my hills every day. So, I was in better shape. I felt good. I was getting outside every day and making sure that happened. So fast forward almost 3 years later, I'm still playing 5 days a week. I play 5 to 6 Monday through Friday on Facebook Live on my Maritri Garrett page. And it's 5 o'clock Pacific because I'm in California, but 8 o'clock Eastern. And so that is live 5 days a week. Although lately I've been doing an interview on Wednesday so that I can have a day off. So I just go ahead and pre-record and post that. But Facebook Live, an hour a day, which means that I get to practice. I'm also working at the hospital where my brother and my mom were. So I started volunteering there when my mom was sick, just playing music for patients. And then that evolved into a paid gig, although it got shut down during the pandemic because nobody was really allowed in or out. But it's great because it's practice time for me, and I get a chance to really help patients, which is what this is about, right? Music is the ultimate healer, I think, and it's the one language we all understand. There are people that watch my show daily from Brazil and New Zealand and the UK and France and Portugal and Africa, and it's such an interesting thing because sometimes they watch it live because they're up in the middle of the night and they can't sleep. Other times they watch it because it's on, but it has been such a connector, and the community that has been built around that, people that I've known for years. I always said I wanted to have all of my friends in the same room, and now I have my friends in the same room, and they become friends and they talk to each other without me being in the way. So that part has been really lovely and really fulfilling. I mean, even through the shutdown, and I sort of feel like with the shutdown, if you didn't pursue the things that you've been talking about your whole life, but you don't have the time, then maybe you don't want those things, and maybe they're just a pipe dream. And I had to really check myself about what I wanted and who I wanted to become during that time. And I actually, for the first time in my life, had the time to do that and make music and practice and really work on myself physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of those things. So in some ways, I think that the pandemic was really valuable and really great and really a learning experience, which I completely appreciate. So you had asked me about what advice do I have for musicians. It's funny, and it's probably not at all what you would expect, but if you can do something else, you should do something else. This is not for the faint of heart. I mean, it's for the dreamers, but you have to have such a hard edge as well to really make it in this industry now. And don't do it for the money. You have to do it for the love, because sometimes there's money, sometimes there's not, sometimes there's work, sometimes there's not, sometimes there's great work, and sometimes there's stuff that's just sort of tedious and not necessarily. But for me, the work is the work. I watch Samuel Jackson, and he's one of my favorites because he's always doing the work, and he doesn't care if the work is paying $10 or, $110 million. It doesn't matter. He's doing the work. He's working on his craft. And if you have the joy of working on your craft and being a better musician, and just sort of not really staying in any particular lane, but finding your your lane and figuring out what that is and doing that with joy. And then I think that is successful. I mean, it really depends on what you consider success. I mean, if you're in it for the jazz millions, well, good luck with that, because that's really not how it works. I mean, you have to love it, and you have to be disciplined. I have really worked on honing my discipline, and I'm writing a book now. I'm working on a musical. I'm working on my next record, and figuring out the time to do all of that, and exercise and cook good food every day and get outside once a day to breathe, and drinking water, and just really taking care of myself. It almost feels like there aren't enough hours in the day to do that. And yet I've been given this gift of time to figure out what that looks like and to make it happen. Social media, websites, email. My website right now is being rebuilt, but you can find me at Facebook at Maritri Garrett, which is where I do my show. But everything else, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and I do have a Facebook page that is Maritri Music. So it's Maritri Music across the board, except my main page, which started out as my friend page, but now I pretty much work off of there. So I'm easily found. I'm streaming on all platforms, mostly under the Soul Folk Experience, which is my collective in New York. We're sort of a band without a band leader. We are all collectively leading this organization of musicians that are writers, vocalists, multi-instrumentalists, and just all in all really good people. Oh, that's the other thing. If you're going to do this, you have to walk in integrity. I mean, I feel like that's advice for anything. Just love what you do what you love, and walk in integrity, right? Figure out how to be on time, how to respect other people and their time and their abilities. Because once you do that, the people who show up for you, those are your people. Because everybody's not your people. You can't share your gifts with everyone. You can't put your pearls before swine. My mother used to say that to me, and I was like, what are you talking about, lady? And now I get it. I totally get it. We are all offered these amazing gifts, and not everyone is worthy of sharing them with. So, but I guarantee that if you do the right things, your tribe will show up. My tribe is still showing up, and I it's funny because I'll meet someone that I didn't know, and I'm like, wait, where have you been all my life? I feel like I've known you all my life, because we're the same. And so finding your people as a support system, and really just digging into the work and being the best that you can. That is my advice. Find an amazing mentor. Lay out what it is that you think you want to do, or not. Sometimes you don't need a plan, because sometimes Spirit speaks to you and tells you exactly what you are supposed to do if you are open to that. I think learning music so early, I mean, I was 2.5. I don't remember not playing. So I played my entire life. Music always spoke to me, and I think I'm lucky. Most people started maybe around 6, but some people start super late. You never know. I mean, I look at somebody like Grandma Moses, who started painting in her 80s, right? So I don't think age is really a factor, or it shouldn't really be a factor that you think of, even though we're in this very youth-driven society. So it's about finding your way, being original, finding your tribe, walking with integrity. If this is not the only thing that you feel you can do, and you can do something else, go do that. If you want that, go do it. Or if you are all about the money and you just want specifically to do that, then there are ways to do that within music. But I just don't think anything is promised, and I think life is too short not to do anything, not to do things that you don't absolutely love. I for me, that is a waste of time. If I don't love someone or something that I'm doing, then I'm just not gonna do it, because there are things that I love, and when I get to the end, I don't want to have any regrets. I want to look back and go, oh, probably should not have done that. But I don't want to look back and say, oh man, I wish I had done whatever it is. I think the goal is just not to have any regrets, and to just keep moving forward until you can't. And I think when I get back to source and I'm talking to Creator, I want to say, I used it all. I used everything you gave me. There's nothing left. Thank you to Charles and Diane for having me on Love Drops podcast. It has been a wonderful experience. And I'm looking forward to the next time, because I always have stuff to talk about. I just want to thank you for featuring my song, No Regrets, in your opening and closing credits. That means the world to me. Just, it is all about sharing this music. And No Regrets can be found by the Soul Folk Experience featuring Maritri on Apple Music as well as Spotify. We're everywhere. We're on YouTube. The Soul Folk Experience featuring Maritri. Trying to stay sane. One look in your eyes, I can't remember my name. I was alone in my skin, and then you jumped in. You remind me life is short and unpredictable. Moments of fleeting and sometimes simply miserable. Tell me what are you scared of, but in the end, the only thing's love in the end. Love's the only thing. Love's the only thing. If you're waiting for change, things stay the same. Things will always stay the same. If you take a step forward, you can see what remains. And always remember life is short and unpredictable. Moments of fleeting and sometimes miserable. Tell me what the hell are you scared of? In the end, the only thing is love. In the end, love's the only thing. I wanna regret the things I've done, never the things I've left unknown. Never a second will I waste, never an opportunity to taste the sweetness of this life, the misery, the strife, through all the challenges I'll fight for. Love is hope for all, love it conquers all, whether big or small. Love never fails. Love is hope for all, conquers all, whether big or small. Love never fails.
Never a second will I waste, never an opportunity to taste the sweetness of this life.
Thank you for tuning in to the Love Drops podcast. Be sure to follow this podcast and share the love with everyone you know. Until next time, this is Charles and Diane signing off. One love.
Love it conquers all, whether big or small. Love never fails. Oh, love it conquers all. Love never fails.